On today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, we'll be discussing the Florida Panthers 5-4 overtime loss on their second end of a back-to-back against the Toronto Maple Leafs. It is a Winans Wednesday edition of the show. We're going to discuss the Florida Panthers getting off to a 2-goal lead, chasing Matt Murray, but we have a whole bunch of questions, especially about the officiating in this one. We're going to discuss this next on today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, January 18th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steele Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects with Heidi Halakash. And don't forget to send in your screenshot of your subscription to the Locked On Florida Panthers YouTube channel and 5-star rating and send it over to me at LO_FLA Panthers via DM or email it to me at LockedOnFLAPanthers@gmail.com for your chance to win 2 free tickets to the Florida Panthers versus Tampa Bay Lightning game on February 6th. So like I said at the top, the Florida Panthers, second end of a back-to-back, no lineup changes. Sergei Bobrovsky starting, and listen, this was a game that was always going to be a difficult task for the Florida Panthers, and of course, a third straight game where the Florida Panthers against the Toronto Maple Leafs. This goes into overtime. It's crazy to think that the Florida Panthers, after everything last season of all the overtime games, that they've been the team that have played the least amount of overtime games for the Panthers, but get off to multiple times a 1-0, then a 2-1 lead, 4-2, and this one ends in overtime with the Florida Panthers losing 5-4 against the Toronto Maple Leafs and get a point out of this. And usually you're most times happy about getting a point in a road game, but of course, we're going to save most of the officiating talk for this game in segment number 2, where we're going to discuss more about this. But it felt like that this one was a little bit stolen, and this will be a great time for me to bring in my guest on the show, Jacob Winans. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. Wish it was after a win, and it very well could have been and should have been. But like you said, I'm happy with the point at the end of the day, and still a great chance for this to be a good road trip. Plus, you noticed off camera, but can't complain too much with my sports the past couple of days. You see, I got the Cowboys jersey on. I think we might have just retired Tom Brady, so it's not all bad for me over here.
Anytime Tom Brady loses, it's definitely a good thing. I mean, he was only in the same division as the football team that I root for like 20 plus years. So great that possibly it might be the end of the road for Mr. Brady. But honestly, my gut feeling says that he's going to sign with the Las Vegas Raiders. That's my gut feeling, to reunite with his offensive coordinator. But let's get into the hockey talk for this one. Second end of a back-to-back, of course, the Toronto Maple Leafs in prime position to be in second in the Atlantic Division. Listen, we're in January. We're already preparing for a rematch of the Lightning versus Leafs in round 2. You look at this game just a few weeks ago, and you're thinking, oh, second end of a back-to-back. The Panther, with the start that the Panthers were off to, especially with how they ended right before the Christmas break, where we even had an episode talking about how the Panthers were in trouble at the time. and still the Panthers get off to a lead multiple times, 3 times actually in this one. And Anton Lundell performing so well again, had a big jump early, complimenting Alexander Barkov. Sam Bennett once again creating puck separating hits on the forecheck as well, resulting in the first goal of the game by Carter Verhaeghe as well. And then Anton Lundell getting that shorthanded chance after Mitch Marner loses the puck at the blue line as well. And Anton Lundell is there on the rebound chance after Barkov shot is saved by Matt Murray. I gotta ask you what your thoughts on Anton Lundell ever since these line shakeups have happened, even though his goal was on the penalty kill.
Yeah, he's been really noticeable playing on Barkov's wing, and that's been kind of a black hole in the Panthers lineup this season with Anthony Duclair on the shelf so far, is finding consistent production on Barkov's wing, and Lundell and Barkov have really gelled as far as that line goes, and it's helped Sam Reinhart produce recently as well. So I've been happy with it. It does hurt a little bit in the bottom six, having a bit of a lack of depth in the bottom six, which is why I think you see Grigory Denisenko in the lineup trying to add some scoring punch to that third line where Lundell is not there anymore. You have Luosterainen, you have Denisenko there. You're trying to generate some offense on that line. I see what they're going for. With that said, though, I've loved Lundell with Barkov on his wing. I think it's great that Lundell is getting to play next to Barkov and really shadow him and learn everything there is to learn in Barkov's game, because, we've been saying this since he got drafted. Lundell is really just a younger, kind of up-and-coming version of Barkov himself. It's almost like they took Barkov and made Lundell in a lab from Barkov's DNA or something. He's really just like Barkov, so it's good that they're playing together. I don't know if it's a long-term solution. When Duclair's back in the lineup, if you want to put Duke right back into the top six on Barkov's wing, I could see that happening, and Lundell going back to the third line. I'd be fine with either scenario. But the way he's playing right now, it's hard to argue with the results. He's playing fantastic hockey.
Yeah, and gotta give credit where credit's due. I know we haven't really given too much credit to Paul Maurice, but getting this like a little jolt. And of course, when Denisenko came around last go around, averaging about a point per game down in Charlotte when he returned, and then now getting an opportunity in this lineup for possibly more ice time. And so many goals in this one, for especially in the first period, 5 of them, which even on when the Panthers were on the penalty kill, they survived 4 power play chances. Of course, giving one of those up just on a rebound that Kerfoot was there to tie the game on a shot by Calle Yarncrook as well, and then the first one, just Mahura just slightly beat by former Panther Dryden Hunt. So a former Panther causing some damage for them. And hey, credit to, but Josh Mahura also bounced back. Just a shot from Brad Goose that went off the end boards, and Mahura just not necessarily a sharp angle, but not the best angle. And then he beats Matt Murray, and the Panthers even chased Matt Murray in this one, and Ilya Samsonov, a familiar opponent for the Panthers, saves every single shot that he faced. Let me check. Let me check to see exactly how many saves he had. 11 out of 11. But the Panthers, really, when they were surviving all the penalties that were called in the first period, I really felt that the Panthers were in prime position to at least escape this one in Toronto.
Yeah, that's kind of what they ended up doing. I mean, you didn't get 2 points out of it, but they did get a point. You can consider that really an escape, and they set themselves up to finish this road trip with 7 out of 8 if they can handle business in Montreal. So at the end of the day, objectively, it's a good spot to be in. Going into tonight, I think we'd all be relatively okay with 1 point. It's just unfortunate because they really deserve 2. The penalty kill was great, and the shots on goal difference, the Panthers not really getting that many shots on goal. It's misleading because typically when we've seen them with a low shot total, we're thinking, oh, the effort wasn't there, or they were playing tired, or they were turtling and not pressuring, not playing any offense. That's what we think of when we see that low shot total, because that has happened at times this year. Tonight, it was just a matter of they were constantly killing penalties. You can't generate any offense killing penalties. Guys had their ice time slashed. They weren't able to roll lines. The offensive zone time is not there when you're on the penalty kill nonstop. So that's really what the problem was. It wasn't a lack of effort. It wasn't a lack of energy. This is probably the most energy I've seen them play with on the second night of a back-to-back this season. So it's unfortunate the result they get away with tonight, because they definitely deserve better, and the effort was there for better. But they're trending upward. You got to be honest. They're playing some pretty good hockey right now, and the stretch of games coming up. It's a really tough stretch. Some real playoff games coming up in the next few weeks. Another back-to-back next week that we're going to talk about. I'm sure that's going to be pretty decisive for where the Panthers end up heading into All-Star break. So they just need to keep playing the same way. The officiating can't possibly be this bad consistently. It's the refs can have a bad game too, and that, I guess that'll kind of transition us into segment 2. But the result was not what they deserved tonight, but the play on the ice is encouraging.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's a perfect way to segue to segment number 2, where we're actually gonna talk about the officiating, something that we rarely do on this podcast, on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about BetOnline. And BetOnline is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Got all the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football, college bowl season, basketball, and hockey. We've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find these at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your sports betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. Segment number 2 here on this Winans Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, where the Florida Panthers lose to the Toronto Maple Leafs by a final score of 5-4 in overtime. This is a rarity for both of us, Jacob, that we are likely going to spend a good amount of time just talking about just the officiating for this one. And listen, for those who might not know, I am also a sports official as well. And yes, we are human beings, but this was, and we all have bad nights sometimes when we arrive on the field or on the ice. And this was one of those for this game between the Florida Panthers and the Toronto Maple Leafs. But of course, there's some that were warranted. The penalty shot that William Nylander had, yes, that was a clear penalty shot in the third period. I thought that the hook that Ryan Lomberg had was a little soft, and I felt like also Radko Gudas had a little bit of a target on his back today. Of course, he has an unsportsmanlike conduct early in the first period. That was one of the ones that we were talking about, the Panthers surviving that first period despite even having a lead after period 1. But I felt like Radko Gudas had a target on his back, because I thought that was goalie interference on Toronto, and he goes to the box for unsport. It's just such a big swing there. And then, of course, the charging call on Aston Reese, where he has a hip check on Pierre Engvall. Aston Reese goes after him, and then just minutes later, it's not. I don't think it's even 5 minutes later. That charging call that happened late in the second period, that I believe that resulted in the Austin Matthews power play goal. Yes, it did. So I felt like Gudas really had a target on his back tonight.
Yeah, so when discussing Gudas, the first thing I want to bring up is that Zach Aston Reese play, which is not a play. It's Zach Aston Reese dropping his gloves on a guy who does not have his gloves dropped and is clearly not trying to engage in a fight, and throwing a full force right hand, bare knuckle, at Radko Gudas' face. and Gudas doesn't have the gloves on, and thank God he ducks because he's just coming back from a concussion, and that clearly would have done some major damage. The refs don't get that in check at all. And then Radko Gudas gets punished for a clean hit. It could not be any more clean, right in the crease, to eliminate a scoring chance, and somehow gets called for charging. You can watch that replay over any angle you want. He does not stride into that hit. It's not predatory. It is shoulder on shoulder. It's stick on stick. He glides into it. It is textbook. It's a perfectly clean hit, and I think they just called it charging because of just how big of a hit it was. He basically gets a penalty for hitting too hard. The net goes flying off its moorings, and of course it looks like a car crash out there, so the refs are going to say, hey, we're putting you in the box for it because it looks bad. You can't officiate that way. It's really rough, and I really do genuinely try not to blame the refs. The Panthers have dug themselves into this hole for the most part this year. They've done it to themselves. A lot of it's been self-inflicted, and we don't hesitate to call the Panthers out on that when they play badly. We don't hesitate to credit them when they play well, and the same has to go for the refs. Tonight was a really, really rough night for the referees. It's really unfortunate. As a longtime athlete myself, it's very easy to get frustrated with officials and want to take it out on them. A lot of times that's not justified, and refs take a lot of criticism that they don't necessarily deserve because they can't be perfect and they're expected to be. But tonight was just out of the ordinary bad. And there were a couple of things to provide some context on this that concerned me a little bit. Paul Maurice's post-game comments, he indicates that the two referees tonight have had some sort of long-standing personal issue with him. There was a statement made that the refs told the players to shut up and play, basically essentially telling them deal with it because they have an issue with the coach. That's obviously going to become a his word versus our word type of deal. You don't expect anything to come out of that, of course. It's not the first time this has happened with the Panthers. We remember Keith Yandel saying that he overheard a ref saying, we're going to call a penalty on number 8 early. That was Jay Sauerluck at the time. They had predetermined that they were going to call a penalty on him, and that was a game where the Carolina Hurricanes got almost 10 power plays, if I'm not mistaken. It was a ridiculous number. So if the refs have personal vendettas or whatever on the ice, there's got to be something done about that. That's not an accusation. That's just me repeating what was said by Coach Paul Maurice, and I'm sure he'll be fine for it. While on the topic of the official situation, I do want to mention this, and we were talking about this before going on. Dave Jackson from ESPN, he's a former NHL ref, and he's now the ESPN NHL rules analyst. Dave Jackson is extremely responsive on Twitter. He replies to fans. He replies to media. He's fantastic. After the game, I did tweet to him, and you can check this out on my Twitter handle at Jacob Winans 8 if you want to go look at it. I did tweet to him and just ask him for some context on some of those key calls. I'll briefly share what he said. Again, you guys can all go read this yourself if you'd like. He said he felt that the Lomberg hooking penalty was a good call because Lomberg made contact with the Maple Leafs skater's hands. He felt that the icing late in the game was a good call. It's a judgment call. The linesman has to make that call at the dot. So I guess we won't complain too much on that. The one that he did say was a referee mistake, and Dave Jackson, again, is not hesitant at all to say when the referees make a mistake because he was one himself, and he did say that he's made plenty of mistakes in his career. The one he said that was a mistake was that Gudas hit that was called a charge. He said he feels the referee made the wrong call there, and that did result in the goal, and that really did turn the tide of the game. That goal was a game changer. That was Austin Matthews' power play goal with 1 second left in the period. It's a whole different game if that doesn't go in. So that's really all they're even. There's not really much else I can say when a former NHL ref and the ESPN rules analyst is saying it was a blown call. So we just have to take it on the chin and move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's not another one that stuck out to me as well when Sam Bennett was called for high sticking on John Tavares, but then then Sam Bennett was slashed as well, and then that wasn't called as well. That was at 5:34 of the third period of the second period, just shortly after the Panthers chased Matt Murray in that one as well. But also it feels like the Panthers, when you, like you said earlier, the shot on goal differential will say we'll say 37-19, but the refs followed their whistle in the third period, and it just proves to show that there is ability to for that to happen. But also, I think it also has to do with the players. They dealt with 2 periods of being shorthanded 7 times in that two period stretch. I felt like as if the Panthers felt like that they had to like kind of walk on eggshells going into that third period. I mean, yeah, they only had 4 shots on goal. There were plenty of good chances a few times they did, but I felt like that affected them going into the third period as well, even though very early on, William Nylander had a penalty shot, which Gus Forsling might have saved the goal on that one, and just the tilting of the ice. The Panthers were, like you said, they weren't able to really get the offensive zone time because of that. And Sergei Bobrovsky, you see 5 goals let up. So many times where Bob was just had 3 shot attempts in one sequence, and he was just coming out big in this one. And it feels, and I feel for Bobrovsky on a night like this.
I do too, because it's another situation where the stats don't reflect the way he played, and he's been fantastic of late. He really has played some great hockey lately, which the Panthers have needed because Spencer Knight has been dealing with some sort of injury. He's now on IR, and before he went on IR, he didn't really look like himself. So they needed someone to step up and take the reins in that goal crease, and Bob has done that. With that said, it's very unfortunate that he didn't get the result that he deserved tonight. He played a great game, a lot better than Matt Murray did up until he was chased. I mean, he was the best goalie on the ice, and it's unfortunate that it came down to that. With the amount of penalties that they had to kill, he was in high pressure situations the whole game. Really stood up to those challenges. And yeah, the last 2 goals that go in against him prior to overtime there's really nothing he can do about it. I mean, the Austin Matthews goal, Bob is positioned well. He gets a little too deep, knocks the net off its moorings, and that throws him off a couple inches to the point where he can't cover that top corner. Perfectly placed shot by Matthews, but that should not have ever happened because there was no penalty before that. Same with the icing late in the game. It goes in off a crazy bounce off William Nylander. I believe it was Nylander, may have been Mitch Marner, one of the 2 of them right in front of the net. I believe it was Nylander. A really fluky bounce off of him, but that was right after an icing that shouldn't have been called. So it's unfortunate for Bob. He played great. He's been playing great. I don't know where he is physically, if he can handle another start without a night off, but hopefully the Panthers can handle business against Montreal defensively and give him a light workload that night if he is between the pipes for that game, because he is on a roll right now, and I hope this game doesn't discourage him in any way because he plays a fantastic game.
Absolutely, and yeah, like you said, the last few goals with Matthews on the power play, and then Nylander right in front off Mitch Marner's shot, and Mitch Marner, even after that turnover in the blue line, he commits a penalty shortly after. So there were times where Mitch Marner was just making a lot of mistakes that was helping the Panthers. And I just noticed that so many times that when the lights get brightest, Mitch Marner sometimes crumbles there as well. But even though that was his 38th assist of the season on that goal by Nylander, and then of course the overtime winner, Nylander just skating through the defense, and then at that point the Carter Verhaeghe right there was just flat out beat, and of course Sergei Bobrovsky can only do so much just on his stomach on that one. But Panthers drop this one 5-4. Get a point. Felt like it should have been 2. But there's a way to salvage this road trip for the Florida Panthers, as they're hoping to get 5 out of 6 points in this one. And that's actually a good way to transition to segment number 3, where we can preview this game between the Florida Panthers and the Montreal Canadiens to wrap up this 3-game Atlantic Division road trip. So stick with us here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Third and final segment here on this Wednesday, January 18th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. I got Jacob Winans here, where the Florida Panthers lose to the Toronto Maple Leafs by a final score of 5-4 in overtime, getting a point out of this. So now 3 out of 4 points in their last few games. Still don't have a 3-game winning streak for the Panthers. But Jacob, Montreal beat Winnipeg tonight, and Winnipeg is had the best record in the Western Conference going into tonight. So no guarantees that this is a win for the Florida Panthers. But when you think about like that last game that the Panthers played the Canadiens, I mean, it was just the very first game out of the Christmas break, and just think about the jolt that the Panthers had right when they came back, because what happened during that? The Panthers got their reinforcements back. Alexander Barkov in his first game coming back from his illness, and Radko Gudas as well. And look what happens. Barkov scores a hat trick in the first period as well. So just a little bit of an encouraging sign coming out of the break, even though the Panthers would lose 2 straight after that. But after those 2 straight losses, that's where the Panthers really started making a little bit of a run, not dropping 2 points as often as they were early in the season. That to me felt kind of like a tone setter at the time for the Panthers.
Yeah, and the Panthers are still trying to really learn how to lock down games when they're in the lead. But against a team like Montreal, you don't want to have to worry too much as you get later in the game. You want to put that game out of reach early against an inferior opponent. Barkov made sure of that last time they met up with the first period hat trick. The Panthers, I believe, put up a touchdown with the extra point. Unlike the Cowboys,
Yep.
Unlike the Cowboys, Brett Maher couldn't get an extra point to save his life. But the Panthers really took it to the Canadiens from the very beginning. You want to see that same thing. I don't think it's going to be as easy. Montreal is a notoriously difficult building to play in. That crowd is absolutely insane. It's not going to be a cakewalk in there. Winnipeg is a really good team, and Montreal beat them. The Canadiens do have some really skilled players on that team. They've had some issues with goaltending. They've had some issues defensively, but they can score, especially at the top of their lineup. And they're not going to be a team that's just going to roll over and take a loss without putting up a fight. The Panthers have to dominate special teams again, have to be better between the pipes than the Canadiens. And at the end of the day, it's just going to come down to, when you play a team that's inferior below you in the standings, you have to just take those 2 points. You have to beat up on teams like that, and it's a good chance for the Panthers to do so. I did notice their game tonight against Winnipeg. It was a couple of former Panthers that really did the damage for the Canadiens. Evgeny Dodonov got 2 goals, I believe, and Mike Hoffman got himself on the score sheet with 1 as well. So it was some former Cats doing the damage for Montreal tonight, and we will definitely look to keep them in check when they meet up on Thursday.
Yeah, and also seeing that Sam Montembeault has started 3 straight games for the Canadians as well.
That's
even though
correct.
Jake Allen has uh, been viewed as the guy who is going to be a start. Well, right now they have an emergency loan from their AHL affiliate in Laval. So I believe maybe Jake Allen might be injured right now for the Montreal Canadiens right now. So they do have an emergency call up on their roster. So maybe that's why Jake Allen, Sam Montembeault, former Panther, Sam Montembeault is between the pipes, and he started back to back as well between the Islanders and the Rangers on the road too. And they're winning. They've won 2 straight. But even though the Panthers did put up a touchdown and an extra point, the 2 goals that they gave up to the Panthers, the 2 goals that the Panthers gave it to the Habs, both came on the power play. One of them was from what if memory serves me right, just as the power play ended from Arbor Jack guy, aka Wi-Fi, and listen, the league's worst power play, or one of them. And for the Panthers, the penalty kill has you might see 2 for 7 for the Maple Leafs on the power play today, and you saw 1 for 5 for the Canucks just last Saturday. But I've seen spurts here and there about how the penalty kill has been better, about how they're forcing to the perimeter. And one also important thing for the Panthers is that they're starting to get their face-off wins as well when they're in their own end, and that's really helping a lot for the Panthers in their penalty kill lately. And the numbers might say one thing, but when you look at a night like Tuesday night against Toronto, I'm not too upset really about kind of the direction we've seen out of the penalty kill in the last few games.
Yeah, I've noticed 2 things that have really made it more of a successful unit. One is, like you said, the face-off wins have definitely improved, which is important because when you win that first draw, you can essentially kill 20 to 30 seconds right off the bat just by clearing it and forcing the other team to have to break into the zone from their own end instead of already being set up. So that's huge, winning that first draw. The next thing that I've noticed is heightened aggressiveness. Part of what's really plagued the Panthers penalty kill is they just sit back in a box, don't really move their feet, and you give up a lot of shots that way. Lately, I've noticed that they're pressuring shooters, they're diving to block shots, and that has made a difference. Heightened aggressiveness, getting out on the puck carrier, forcing them to make a really quick decision. These are professional hockey players that their speed in processing the game is so much faster than even us watching on TV. So if you give them time and space, they're going to find the right play to make. You can't allow that time and space, and the Panthers have really been pressuring puck carriers, and they're diving to block shots now. It's heightened aggressiveness, and it's definitely worked in their favor, and it even resulted in a shorthanded goal, which we hadn't really seen. So I've been impressed with the penalty kill, and a game against a team like Montreal, who has a really low ranking power play. It could be a really good time to put up a goose egg on the board and keep a power play off the score sheet entirely. They do have to work on staying out of the box. I can't really fault them too much tonight for that because it was really, I mean, anyone with eyes saw that they were playing a pretty clean game and kind of got hosed. But for the most part, they have to just continue to stay disciplined, stay out of the box. And I feel confident with them killing 2 to 4 penalties a night the way they're playing. I really feel like that's the standard they're setting with the way they've been playing. So yeah, that game against Montreal, it's a big one because it's the difference between a successful and a average road trip, and you want to have success on that. Tonight's game against Toronto, while we did not get 2 points, it almost ends up breaking even for us, which is all you can really ask for because Buffalo was playing Chicago, Detroit was playing Arizona. You think we're going to lose ground with those games. Both teams lost in shootouts, so it ends up not really damaging the Panthers in any way. Everything is still in front of them.
Yeah, we were talking about before recording that we both saw the last few minutes of Ducks Penguins and just how the Penguins had an opportunity to, the Ducks had an opportunity to win, and John Gibson was great in that one. So, but of course, the Panthers do have to take care of this business. And going back to the penalty kill, I guess this is what we're really starting to see as far as a process for the Panthers on the penalty kill, even though the results aren't there. And we've seen it also with the goal scoring as well, and how the Panthers weren't getting that timely scoring. And sometimes now I guess we can give some credit to the expected goals model here about the process when it comes to to the Panthers scoring, and of course being better with killing off penalties. And hopefully for the Panthers' sake, that's the numbers will catch up to how we're seeing how they're pinning them to the boards, and of course forcing them to the perimeter as well. That we can see more games where it's just 100% on the penalty kill, even though they did do it on Monday. Hey, so one of the best games that the Panthers played definitely on Monday. But Jacob, I want to say thank you once again for joining me on this Winans Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you as always, even though it came with an L today. Still a chance for the Panthers to get 5 out of 6 points on this with a win on Thursday night. So tell everybody where they can find you online.
Definitely. You can find me on Twitter at Jacob Winans 8. While you're there, definitely encourage everyone to give that little thread with Dave Jackson a quick read. He gives great insight on the mind of an NHL official and really explain some of those calls. So if you happen to stumble across that, definitely give that a read. Give Dave Jackson a follow. He's fantastic. And real quick, another before we got on, but I did want to throw this out there as well. I had a really cool interaction with one of our listeners today. I did not get his Twitter handle, but he goes by Miami Fan in Tampa on Bleacher Report. Had some really awesome words for us in the show. So I want to shout him out and thank him for listening. I know it's not easy being a Miami fan over in Tampa, so I appreciate that as well.
Awesome. And thank you. Thank you, Miami Fan in Tampa, for listening. Of course, every single one of you as well who take the time out of your day to listen to just two guys just ramble about hockey and have fun with it too. So thank you guys for listening, and thank you, Jacob, and I'll see you next week.
Looking forward to it.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steele Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects with Heidi Halakash. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure to listen to today's episode of Locked On Sports Today. Peter Bukowski spends 20 minutes Monday through Friday discussing the entirety of the sports scene with some exclusive interviews and the take of the day. Make sure to listen to Locked On Sports Today on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans, and you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.